It looked like fun, but I didn't get yesterday's slut walk protests in Melbourne and Brisbane. There'll be 2 more of them next month in Sydney and Adelaide. But what exactly is the point? The protesters are angry that a policeman in Toronto told students that women might be safer from attack if they didn't dress like, well, as he put it, sluts. Joining me now is one of the protest organisers, writer, comedian, music critic, Clem Bastow. Clem, what was the problem with what this policeman said to these women?
Well, it plays into this culture of victim blaming, which is the sense that the idea that if somebody is raped or sexually assaulted, there must have been something they did to somehow invite that crime. It tends to be based on how people dress and how women dress, but it also affects a lot of different communities. So, for example, it affects the trans community. People will say, well, they shouldn't rub it in our faces. It affects sex workers when people say, well, it's an occupational hazard.
You know, I've had friends who are transgender and transsexual. I wouldn't say that of them. And as a dad, I would say that this Toronto policeman gave good advice. The world is nasty out there, and I wouldn't advise a woman to dress very provocatively at dark by a dark road.
Yes, but don't you then think that we should be putting the responsibility back on the perpetrators of the crime? That's the thing. I
certainly would.
I mean, we teach people, particularly women and particularly young women, to mitigate risk when we should be teaching people more generally, don't sexually assault people, don't rape people. And
can't you do both?
Well, yeah.
I mean, I'm very tough on, you know, clearly I'd be very tough on rapists. I mean, there's no excuse. But if my daughter, when she's a bit older, was to say, Dad, I'm dressing like this and I'm going down, you know, past King Street or King's Cross or whatever, Hindley Street at, you know, 2 a.m, I'd say, don't do that. It's not wise. Isn't that good advice?
It feels like good advice, but it keeps perpetuating this idea that if a crime were to happen to her, that somebody could then go, well, you shouldn't have been dressed like that.
You think I think that?
No, not necessarily, but I think greater society does.
I don't think that's right, do you?
Well, we've had... Law reform, I think, has made some good strides towards moving beyond asking rape victims, what were you wearing? You know, how many boyfriends have you had? Were you drunk? But I think more broadly, there is still this general sense that people who dress a certain way are in some way inviting violence against themselves. And the thing is, we need to be able to see that some people do want to invite attention. Some people do dress a certain way because they are looking for something, but they're not looking to be assaulted.
Thank you so much for joining me for the debate.
Thank you, Andrew.
On Thursday, ABC Managing Director Mark Scott told a Senate committee he'd got a most unexpected complaint after last year's election.
The politician who was most outspoken personally to me in complaints about our coverage of the campaign was the leader of the Greens.
Bob Brown thinks the coverage of the left-leaning ABC was too tough on the Greens. How would he have coped if he'd been in Tony Abbott's shoes? George W. Bush was supposed to be the dumb one and Barack Obama the genius, which proves it's all in the eye of the beholder, or of the media. I mean, would you have heard the end of it had Bush done what President Obama did on his trip to Britain this week and signed the visitors' register at Westminster Abbey with the date 2008? And how they'd have mocked Bush if he'd tried to toast Queen Elizabeth while everybody else was standing for her national anthem.
The vitality of the special relationship between our peoples, and, in the words of Shakespeare, to this blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England, to the Queen.
We all make mistakes, but only some of us are forgiven them by the media. And to our spin of the week. You've heard it 1,000 times that to stop global warming, we've got to cut our emissions, or as the urges now call it,
carbon pollution.
Carbon pollution.
Carbon pollution.
Carbon pollution.
Carbon pollution.
Carbon pollution.
Carbon pollution? Now that phrase is meant to make you think of dirty soot, but it's a lie. They aren't talking about carbon, but carbon dioxide, which isn't black stuff, but invisible gas. And carbon dioxide isn't pollution, but plant food for photosynthesis. Now look, this is the sound of carbon dioxide. And if that really was pollution, would I do this? And that's the show. Thanks for watching. But please join our debate by sending me an email here at 10, thebolt@network10.com.au. And there's also my blog, heraldsun.com.au/Andrew Bolt. Now stay with us. Meet the Press is next, with that lucky Hugh Riminton interviewing the Climate Change Minister. But for now, I'm Andrew Bolt, and I look forward to your company at the same time next week. And it's goodbye.